Hi, everyone. Eric Miller here, Director of Communications for Farmfolio. I'm joined today by CEO Oscar Baracaldo, and today we want to cover an interesting topic here for episode 2, something that we get asked a lot, both by existing farm owners and stakeholders, and also by interested parties, prospective farm owners. And that's what's going on with the Colombian peso. The COP has fluctuated pretty dramatically over the past year and a half. And we get a lot of questions about it. So today we want to go into why that's happened, what are sort of the driving factors behind that, whether that phenomenon will be sustained, the appreciation of the peso against the dollar, and how it affects our lines of business and our perspective on the Colombian business landscape. So just to give everybody a little bit of context before we get into this, around this time last year, the peso was hovering at about 4,400 to the dollar. And then towards the end of the year in Q4, it spiked up to around 5,000, almost 5,100, I believe. And as of this point this year, it's appreciated against the dollar, going back down to, I think as of today, it's around 4,180. And so it's been an interesting phenomenon to observe. And so, Oscar, I wanted to get your opinion on sort of what are the driving factors behind this movement and what it means for the country.
Sure, absolutely. Look, I think with the dollar COP ratio and exchange rates that we've been seeing varying throughout the year, there are three key drivers, right? One, oil prices are a big driver with the COP. Obviously, there's a lot of production in Colombia, and you will always be finding that correlation with the COP and the oil prices, right? Oil prices go up, COP usually goes up, but that's not a rule of thumb, if you will, when you're looking at it, because we're also having the dollar appreciating or strengthening. I think that is one of the key components to this. Of course, I think the dollar, there's been a lot of speculation about its weakening, but I think that's a whole different discussion to have. Now, second variable, I think, with the peso is the amount of dollars and foreign currency coming in from. And I think that high exchange rate, or that high reward exchange rate that we experienced during the third and fourth quarter of last year invited a lot of foreign investment, right? So you had euros, dollars, and other exchanges coming into the country, especially during the first quarter. Usually you have two cycles here in Colombia. One is when books are closed, and during October and December, you close the books, and a lot of those distributions go out of the country, and that usually affects the peso going into the first quarter. So that's also part of, kind of how the peso to the dollar behaves. But also during the first quarter of this year, you had a lot of money getting pumped back into the Colombian economy. Amongst those, the Gilinski transaction that we talked about last time, right? And the third one is, there's always speculation and the risk aversion of an economy. Colombia did go through major political change in the last 12 months. And I think there was a lot of speculation of where that new movement was going to go. I think overall, Colombia has a very business-friendly environment that's not going to change anytime soon. And I think during that period of change, like with any economy, currencies tend to weaken if the populace believes that otherwise things are going to change, right? And they haven't. I think there's a lot of we could cover that in another episode, but. Overall, we're kind of getting back to where the peso had been, or should it have continued its trajectory. And I think, at least from our forecasting and currency forecasting, from like our farm forecast, we were using around 3,700 with an arbitrage growth on the annual basis of anywhere from 4 to 6% annually. So if you were to take that from where we were at, say, beginning of 2022, we would be on the current trend that we are today, which is around 4,100 to the dollar.
Sure. So you see this as more of a correction. And I guess that leads into the next question that I wanted to ask. This is sort of a realignment, readjustment towards, how currencies are performing in the region. Do you see this trend holding or accelerating? I mean, I don't want to, I don't want to inject too much of my personal politics into this, but it does look like the US dollar is weakening. We had this huge spree of money printing in the COVID era.
Sure.
And it looks like we're beginning to observe those circumstances and those effects in emerging market currencies. Do you see this trend continuing? Do you see the appreciation of the COP accelerating, or what's your perspective on that?
It's such a big conversation for everybody, and all I can give you is my personal and maybe some abstracts of some of the conversations I've had with some policymakers here in Colombia, some context in the US and in Europe. But overall, I think that's part of that speculation. And yes, I mean, I think differently from say the US, Colombia, I think didn't go through that money printing process that the US went through, and a lot of that conversation of the inflation exports of the US to other nations has been transpiring. And I think that's why a lot of countries are not stopping their interest rates going up, even though the
Sure.
US is already signaling to stop.
Yeah.
I think there's still a ways out for us to correct ourselves as a global economy, because I mean, after stopping the entire world for a year and a half and then some, right? I mean, getting things into gear, getting started, that's very costly, and I think it really filtered a lot of the economy. Still is, right? But yeah, I think that's a big difference between Colombia and the US. But when you look at that specific relationship, I'm not trying to talk about macroeconomics here. Colombia and the US have such a close relationship, and I believe that there's such a strong interest from the US regarding Colombia as an ally in the region to be able to oversee Caribbean and Pacific on our cluster at least.
Yeah.
And I think it is that trust that has allowed those dollars to come in and prop the Colombian economy, the Colombian peso to be strengthened. So it's very symbiotic in nature with the dollar for Colombia. So if you pump a bunch, obviously it's going to strengthen the Colombian economy and the Colombian peso. And if there's a lack of trust, it's going to be it's going to be the other way around, right? So I think overall we should see the strengthening of the Colombian peso as a signal that the U.S. economy and the international economy is seeing Colombia as a lesser risk. And it's looking at Colombia as that nearshoring opportunities, especially for the U.S. Currently making it the top three. I think it's top three or top four currency in the world.
Yeah, right now. I think it was top three as of May, June. I'm not sure about now, but it definitely was in that status. And I wouldn't be surprised if it was still there.
Sure.
So, the political question is something that I think we could cover in later episodes. There's a lot of talk about Petro, and I think when he first got elected, there was this sort of risk discount to the currency, because people were concerned about sort of the business environment and the framework. And I think that, we are basically a year into the Petro presidency, almost to the day, I believe. I think he was inaugurated on the 6th or 7th of August of last year.
7th, yeah, 7th.
And, so there was a lot of speculation, but it's really proven to be a very pragmatic administration. And it's continued this sort of business-friendly environment. But let's leave that for future episodes. What I wanted to ask you, and what we've been getting a lot from our stakeholders, is how does this affect our lines of business, and what does it mean for farm owners and the long-term picture of the value of real assets here in Colombia?
Sure, absolutely. Look, ultimately it's a supply and demand conversation, right? And not to go too far with this. For the international economy, Colombia, differently from other origins or other countries, has got commodities, right? So you've got oil, you've got land, which is a very hot topic and one that we're obviously involved in. And the thing is, as long as there's that, and as long as there's cash flows on top of those real estate properties, that conversation is going to continue to evolve. I mean, this weekend alone, I flew in last night from Bogota I was having some meetings with the agriculture department of the country, and came back. I mean, the planes to Medellin are sold out. I was getting notifications on, hey, would you like to be flexible about your seats? We'd like to resell your ticket and whatnot, of course. Sure enough, I got into the plane. It was an hour late. Was waiting for a bunch of people coming, because there was a lot of international people, or people coming from overseas, and probably 80% was from the US, right? And places like Medellin, where there's a lot of tourism, a lot of activities going on. You've got the flower fair, I think that's flower festival. They've got this weekend today and over the week, I think, and you can see how that inflow starting to occur for the entire country, and same thing with other categories like food, like farming, and as long as that continues to occur, and those dollars and other currencies continue to flow in, that's going to prop up the growth of the peso. And I think, you're not going to see, of course, being completely honest, at least my perspective, the dollar outpacing, or catching up incredibly. Still, that's why this is such a good opportunity. There's still a lot to do. This is an emerging economy with inefficiencies, and it is through attaining those efficiencies in the process that you're able to catch an upside and be able to gain more growth than you would in a developed economy where a lot of those things are already in place, right? So I think it's good. Sometimes it can be a double-edged sword. Some inputs that are brought in from overseas, like fertilizers or some of the things, can be affected by the price of the dollar. But ultimately, it's a catch-22, because the dollar goes up, your price of exports increases, and you're still producing in pesos. So it's still a good ratio, and I think it's been maintained for the last 15 years. And I think the experts and ourselves here in Farmfolio believe that trend will continue.
Yeah, definitely. Well, great. Well, I'd like to leave it there. In the upcoming episodes, we're going to be discussing a little more of the political situation, another thing that people have asked about pretty consistently. So we're going to be taking a look at that. Like we mentioned, it's just about the 1-year anniversary of President Gustavo Petro. So we're going to be looking at his performance and some of the things going forward. But thanks for joining us. Hope you've enjoyed this second episode of the Farmfolio vlog, and we'll catch you soon.